welcome to the new Footie Dads podcast. I'm
Hello.
Andy, and a devoted, loyal, passionate, and ardent gooner.
Boo! And I'm Ben. Very, very happy to be here with you all. I'm an avid, lifelong Tottenham Hotspur fan. Come on, you Spurs!
And it's important to add as well, while being a loyal and devoted gooner, I am also the father of my son, Leo, who celebrated his 6-month birthday recently. And that was a lovely little occasion. We did a little cake, got the candles out. It was lovely.
And I myself am a father of 2 young children, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And the purpose of this podcast is predominantly for me and Andrew and myself to talk about our 2 key loves in life, football and fatherhood. We'll be talking throughout the week about different games, analysis, reviews, and throwing in some funny stories about fatherhood.
Well, I have got some funny stories. I mean, I must say, you're actually quite ahead of me, Benji, on the journey of fatherhood. I'm only at the beginning, but there's been some great moments, special moments. There's been some funny moments. There's been some traditional Andrew Pentold stupidity along the way. But overall, I don't think I've done a bad job, and I can't wait to share some of the anecdotes with you, some of the highs, some of the lows, and some of the pure ignorant moments that I've been unfortunate to partake in as well.
So first and foremost, as our listeners will know, this weekend is the FA Cup third round. Last night saw the first match between Crystal Palace and Everton. That is 99 minutes. I will never get back those 9 minutes of stoppage time. I thought maybe there'd be a goal after Calvert-Lewin was sent off at Everton. Palace just had nothing there. It is time for Roy Hodgson to retire. Would you agree, Andrew?
Well, yeah, but then again, though, Palace are bang in there for Eddie Nketiah of my beloved Arsenal. So, Eddie could save Roy Hodgson's bacon by banging in some goals. Who knows?
Well, he's not scoring many goals for you, so I don't know how many goals he's going to get for Palace.
Yeah, but he might. I think the pressure of being a top team, I just don't think he's quite at Arsenal level. And we talk about that domino effect. There's rumours that Nketiah could be sold and that could free up funds for Tony. Who knows? But I think Nketiah could do well at Selhurst Park. I think that the pressure being off, he could bang in some goals. Who knows?
But I do think, I know we'll come to this a bit later on, but I do think Ivan Toney, I can see him in an Arsenal shirt. I think he is potentially a great solution to what you need, what he needs, and that could really push him on for an England place coming to the Euros. But we'll talk about that a bit later. So the idea of this podcast, as we've mentioned, is talking about football, fatherhood, and everything in between. So we'll start this by Andrew. As we know, he is a lifelong supporter of his beloved Arsenal. Obviously, I'm a fan of their big North London rivals. So it's interesting for us to have this discussion. So my first question to start our new podcast, Andrew, how do you think the season has gone so far for Arsenal?
I think it's been a good season. Well, the start of it was good. I mean, we were winning, not necessarily in a spectacular manner, but we were getting the results. The goals were being shared around. There was a couple of more resounding victories along the way, but we've had these 2 really disappointing results recently. That was the defeats against West Ham at the Emirates and Fulham away. That's those games have really kind of set us back. Just some of the refereeing and the decisions going Arsenal's way in particular. I mean, I look at that Newcastle game. It wasn't just one reason why the goal should have been ruled out, but there was, I think, 3 or 4. And then we had another, and then I think we had another situation straight after that where at Aston Villa, where we had what many believe was a perfectly good equaliser ruled out for no reason. I mean, actually, the player handballed it first before our player did. There's been a lot of inconsistency, and it put me off. It drained my appetite for a while. But I'm watching a lot of games. I'm watching all the Arsenal games. I love football. I can't keep away.
Obviously, this weekend being FA Cup weekend, you've had a couple of poor results in recent weeks. Would you say that this is a good time for Arteta to reassess the team, to look at who you need over the transfer window, and tricky match against Liverpool? What's your thoughts? Do you think he's going to focus on the FA Cup or focus on the league and upcoming Champions League games?
I think he will focus on the FA Cup. I mean, I don't think there's a team in the Premier League that's won the FA Cup more times than Arsenal. So he won't neglect it. He has a duty to the club and the fans to focus on it. I don't think that it's going to be a time to reassess. I think they're doing a warm weather training camp in Dubai after that match. So that will be the time for regrouping and evaluating the season and maybe assessing what they're going to do in the transfer market.
Who do you see as integral to sign in this transfer window? Like, who would be your perfect, in an ideal world, who would be your perfect signing or signings that you think you really need that would take you to that next level and give you that consistency and just push you over to the edge to do one better than last season?
I think we need a striker. I mean, I think Gabriel Jesus was brought in to score the goals, but he's a great player. He's like infectious. But he's just not going to bang in 20 goals a season. I think we need a striker, someone of the Osimhen mold. I don't know. Could we bring in Tony? I don't know. It just doesn't really excite me. He's I know he's got that physical prowess that maybe that we've lacked since Giroud left, but he could be good. But I think he's going to take big money to prize away. They're talking of 100 million, and I'd rather wait for Osimhen. But I just don't know. Can we finish the season by sharing the goals around, which we have been doing in the first half of the season and most of last season? I just think we've been found out a little bit recently. But then again, City won a league sharing the goals around by playing false number nines. They had Gundogan chipping in, Bernardo Silva. So I don't know. But a striker. We need a striker. And I also think we need cover in the fullback areas as well. Saliba and Gabriel, great, done a fantastic job, but they need a rest. And I just don't think we've got an adequate backup to bring in to like give them a rest some games, because Saliba's only young and Gabriel's only young. And also the same applies to Saka and Martinelli. No ideal backup.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with everything you're saying there. And I think Saka against Fulham was the first time probably this season I've seen him like just look tired. And he was easily caught a couple of times and found out, like you said, which is unusual because I think Saka has just been unbelievable for you. And as you mentioned, it's because so many of your players, like Spurs players, are very young. You know, this is your future for several seasons. So it's exciting times. I think Tony could be the icing on the cake because he's such a strong, powerful player. And because you get so many chances in games, he could potentially get so many goals for you, because at the moment, that's, I think, where you are missing a 20-plus goal striker. Okay, Andrew, what's your thoughts about Spurs and Ange Postecoglou?
It's refreshing, especially it must be refreshing for you when you take into account the defensive managers that you had previously. And as a neutral, I mean, I used to enjoy watching Poch. He had that high press attacking attitude, but Ange's got that. I do think he's a little bit naive at times. The first 10 games, brilliant. I mean, Maddison hit the ground running. Van der Ven was really solid at the back. He did get a lot of injuries, but to be fair to Ange, he's got on with it. He hasn't moaned. You have suffered from some defeats, which you might not have suffered if you had your full complement of players. You had to play Emerson and I think it was Davies at the back, which is, even I understand, is difficult. Why he didn't play Dyer, I know he might not be flavour of the month, but, you know, at least he knows the position. And when you're talking about defenders at the back, you need to play players that know the position. I don't know if you can win a Champions League or an FA Cup or a league by playing all-out attack. Does he have a plan B? Does he have the tactical awareness to go all defensive in a Champions League semi-final if he needs to? Would he even go against his principles if he needed to? There's some food for thought for you to do. But overall, you know, you're in a good position. You've lost these games. You've got players coming back. So dare I say it, I think you're perfectly poised for a successful second half to the season.
All very valid points. I mean, I think first and foremost, I love Ange. He just seems the sort of guy you'd meet down the pub and could have a nice chat with about life, about anything. It doesn't come across arrogant like Conte or Mourinho, who clearly weren't Spurs. Whereas Ange has that, just like Pochettino had it. What I will say is it's frustrating that obviously we're now in January where we're just starting to get some players back, but now we're losing 3 players, including our captain. And obviously losing Son is huge to us because he scores most of our goals. Now, obviously, Richarlison has started to come good and scored goals, but he's not really, in a similar way to Arsenal, he's not probably going to get you 20-plus goals a season. So it's going to be a challenging 4 to 5 weeks, even though we are getting some players back. With regards to the high line that Ange plays, one of the key reasons he brought in Van der Ven is because he was actually the fastest defender in the Bundesliga. And if you watch him in the games he played, you'll see that the way he catches up on players with that higher line is immense. The guy is so fast despite being so tall. I mean, many people have compared him to Jan Vertonghen, except Jan Vertonghen was nowhere near as fast. So it's great to see. Obviously, it's been a frustrating few weeks ever since that Chelsea match, ironically. Of course, it had to be against our former manager where the kind of shit hit the fan, excuse my French, but we obviously had two injuries that game, 2 integral injuries to Maddison and Van der Ven. And we had 2 sendings off. After such a brilliant first 10 games where we had manager of the month 2 months in a row, we had players getting player of the month with Son and Maddison. We lost Maddison, we lost our midfield, and obviously we lost our 2 centre-backs for several games. So he was playing fullbacks, as you mentioned, Andrew. The irony with Eric Dyer is he obviously hasn't rated him, but as you may have seen in the news today, he's actually been linked to signing in January to Bayern Munich, which I thought was quite interesting. Clearly, he does offer something, and he could even get back into the England team if he has a good run there. I don't know if he'll go now or if they'll wait to the summer. It obviously depends if we bring someone in. But what I do know is for a lot of Spurs fans, we have faith in the Ange way. It may not be pretty and we will concede goals, but his objective and his mindset is always we'll score more goals than the opposition. So there'll be lots of goals, there'll be lots of excitement throughout the game and lots of chances. We could be 3 or 4 down in the first half against some teams, but we could also be 3 or 4 up. And his hope, and it was clearly working, is that we're more likely to be winning than losing. Just while we finish off now with the FA Cup this weekend, Andrew, there's obviously some exciting games taking place. There is always a giant killing. And who do you think will be a giant killing this weekend, if any?
Well, this is difficult. I mean, I'm looking through the fixtures here. I mean, whisper it quietly, Wigan versus Manchester United. We all know Wigan's FA Cup winning pedigree. Back in the days of that charismatic chairman they had. Was it Dave Whelan?
David Whelan, yeah.
So we never know.
The one that stands out for me is the North East derby, Sunderland against Newcastle. As we've seen in recent weeks, Newcastle look a shadow of themselves last season. They look tired and they just haven't been playing particularly well, which is really surprising given how amazingly well they were playing last season. Sunderland, meanwhile, they're doing all right in the Championship. They've got a pretty strong team. And our Spurs boy that barely ever played for us, Jack Clark, who then left to go to Sunderland, is the man I could see getting the winning goal. He's been scoring a lot of goals in the Championship. And I can see them at home at the Stadium of Light getting a result against their big North East rivals. So, my prediction is Sunderland to beat Newcastle.
I actually don't. I actually think Newcastle will win the game quite comfortably. It's one of those, I just think the quality will tell. Their big players will turn up. But I suppose,
anything's possible. Big stadium. They've got a lot of support, Sunderland. Get behind the team, the fans. There'll be a lot of emotions. Sunderland, they're a sleeping giant who did very well in the Premier League for many years. Will they come back up this season? I doubt it, because I think there's stronger teams above them. But could it be an upset this weekend in the current situation how Newcastle are playing? You're right. It could be that they concede 4 goals in the first half and then Newcastle back to how they were playing last season. But there's also a chance that the tiredness will continue to show and Sunderland will get a fluky early goal. There could be a sending off. Anything's possible, which is why being a North East derby as well, such a rich tradition between these two teams, it's an exciting game. I mean, there's some good games. I mean, there's not as many lower league teams. There's no lower league team playing a Premier League team like there has been in previous years. But there are some real tasty games. Obviously, yours against Liverpool and the Sunderland Newcastle are the two that stand out for me. So that concludes our football talk for this weekend. Obviously, there's Premier League is coming back soon and we'll be back on to discuss those games next week. But we'll just like to have a little chat now, briefly, just to give our listeners, Andrew, a little bit of information about how your first 6 months as a father has been. Any tips for our listeners? Any funny stories you've had? Take it away.
Well, there's been some funny moments, but I just wanted to talk about a challenge which we had to face. And it was basically the day after Leo was born in the hospital. We were told that the shape of his head isn't quite how it should be. The condition is actually called craniosynostosis. So again, I'm skipping a lot here. We went to Great Ormond Street, which is a world-renowned hospital for children. They gave us 3 options. They said that we can do nothing and hopefully the problem won't become an issue for Leo when he grows up. They said we could have keyhole surgery, which will involve an overnight hospital stay to correct the problem. And then he will have to wear a helmet for a year in order to help the head get back into shape. And the third option was to have a 5-hour risky sort of surgery where they operate quite close to the brain. But if all goes well, it solves the problem instantly and he wouldn't need the helmet. So we went for the keyhole option. And thankfully, it's all been really, really, really positive and successful. Leo's adapted well to the helmet. His head circumference is moving in the right direction. There's still a long way to go, but we're having regular checkups, the orthotic company near where we live, and we have an appointment coming up at Great Ormond Street shortly. I guess what I would say to parents is that the day after your son or your daughter is born, you never know what they might find when the pediatricians do the routine check. So you have to sort of prepare yourself that there might be something which requires immediate action to rectify, or really it could just be where everything is fine, but you have to prepare for something. I mean, we had tears in our eyes. It was very, very emotional after a lack of sleep in the hospital when we found out about this condition for Leo. But so my advice to parents is try to remain calm if the pediatrician does highlight something which needs rectifying. I know it's difficult, but if you can't remain calm, it's very, very difficult to be pragmatic and think about the next steps. In terms of funny moments, there is one which sticks out. We had a handyman come to the house. I can't remember what it was for, but we booked him to come and do some odd jobs. And we've known him for a while, and I couldn't wait to just show him Leo. So I picked Leo when he arrived. I picked up Leo in my arms, and then suddenly I see coming out from below onto our brand new carpet, and I'm wondering why. What's going on here? It turns out that I dressed him perfectly, but I forgot to put the nappy on. Brilliant. So my wife, it was crazy. So my wife wasn't the best pleased, but then again, she did also say to me, Andrew, if that's the only thing you do wrong on your journey as a parent, then you'll be going in the right direction.
And of course, Andrew, just to give our listeners some context, Andrew, prior to getting married and having a child, did struggle with common sense and would often lose things, leave things in random places, and not necessarily know what time of day it was in certain situations. So you're doing pretty well so far, Andrew. So for that to be the only hiccup, I think is pretty good so far.
The only major hiccup. Obviously, there's dressing him, putting things around the wrong way. I had a major issue until recently with, believe it or not, putting trousers on my son. But my wife just pulled me aside. She goes, Andrew, what you need to do, you need to just pull them up, and then you need to put your finger through the hole. And then so you actually exposed the hole for the foot at the bottom, and then you just put the baby's foot in. I was going all about the houses. I was just trying to pull it up, trying to get it on, but I was making the right pig's ear of it.
Again, for context to our listeners, it took Andrew until he was 18 to be able to put on his own pair of trousers. So once
I don't know about that. And other than that, really, just a few issues with the buggy, trying to strap Leo in a few times. Again, I must say, practical elements are often my biggest downfall, and sometimes common sense. There hasn't been too many dramas. I'm pleased with how things have gone, and bring on the rest of the journey in the wonderful world of fatherhood. What about you? I mean, you are much further ahead in this wonderful world of fatherhood.
There's one particularly funny story that I will talk about now. Obviously, there's lots of stories that in my first son, who's now 4, obviously he was born in the early days of COVID, which was obviously a challenging first year because we couldn't take him out very far. We could literally just go to the park and that was it, which is probably enough when you've got a newborn anyway. But it's just when you have, as for many of us, as for most of us, when you have your ability to go out anywhere and everywhere with a child, to take him to see family and friends, and you can't do it because you're on lockdown, was very challenging. When we had our second son, we would give them baths together, and my wife and I would split them sometimes on the weekend, and because she would do it most of the time during the week. Our first son was still toilet training at the time when he moved from nappies to pants. Whereas our younger son, who was at the time like just crawling or learning to walk, just early days of walking, I was going to take them to the park in the morning, but I'd given them a bath and I'd just got my first son changed. He ran off into the lounge, and whilst I was trying to get his younger brother Guy changed, I heard him call me because he was doing a wee on the floor. Okay, and he didn't quite know how to go to the toilet. So he was doing a wee on the floor, and he made like a whole line of wee as he ran to the toilet, pulling his pants down. And then I was trying to help him. Meanwhile, left my 1-year-old in the bathroom thinking he'll be fine just sitting on the floor, went to go and get him, and he'd done a poo on the floor.
Oh, dear me.
That was two for the price of one.
The price of one. I have one issue. It's quite funny. In the morning, when I change Leo, I noticed that when I take the nappy off after a long night and there's a full nappy, I have to really rush to get the wipe out because he does a wee in that gap between getting the wipe and replacing the nappy, and he wheezes into the air, and I always miss it. You're
missing a trick, Andrew. You must cover up the family jewels with that wet wipe.
And the time it takes me to pull the wet wipe out of that packet with that annoying bit in the middle, he's already weed into thin air.
Once again, you need to plan ahead. Always have the wet wipe out ready.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
the
I'm
fact
gonna
that
do that.
Leo is now 6 months, you should know this.
I must correct myself. I do have the wet wipes next to me and ready to go, but I just haven't pulled the actual individual wipe out of the packet.
The answer's
So
twofold. First of all, it's very difficult to get one individual wet wipe out of those packs.
it is.
They designed them so you take 10 out at a time.
I must say, my wife manages to get one out every single time. I must say,
women have these special skills that men don't possess. That's the bottom line. But with regards to the PP, that's one thing I learned very early, is to have one wet wipe or a couple of wet wipes ready. As soon as that nappy comes off, get that wet wipe over that gun to ensure that gun is not launched on you, particularly when it's 2 a.m.
That's probably a great way to end on a nice, funny anecdote.
We'll see you next week.
Looking forward to it already.